Hello and welcome to the new Blender tutorial series I'll be doing. Actually, it's part of a Trainz tutorial series I'll be doing, but this is just the Blender part of it. And yeah, so the basics of Blender. And so today I'm gonna teach you guys how to set up your diagrams and get your basic shape done. So first thing you want to do, you're going to start out like this. If you scroll in and out, you zoom in and out. If you hold down your middle mouse, or your middle scroll wheel, you can look around and notice up top here, we're going to use these. If you press on these circles, you can pull up your views. So like there's X, Z, Y, the other side, and do stuff like that. So that comes in handy when you need to like go do something really precise and need to really get in here, because if you can also do it like this, but it's just a lot easier from one of those views. So first thing you're going to want to do is make sure your cube's selected and press X and just delete that cube. So then next thing you're going to want to do is go into, well actually first thing you want to do is find a diagram for whatever you're making. In this case I will be making a H-12-44. I forget who actually made that, but it's for the Transportation Museum. So Beaufort Moorhead, pretty sure I pronounced that right. So some diagrams you can just find by looking them up on Google. In my case, I had a friend and he just found them for me and actually had some. So if you have a friend you think they might have diagrams, just go ask them. Don't harass them or anything, but or just Google it first before you go asking anyone, but generally you can find some pretty good diagrams on Google. So I'm just going to pull up my diagram. So first thing you want to do once you have your diagram, you obviously want to save that image into a folder that you can find. Then you want to go into the X view, and generally I like making the X being forward just because that's what I like. So go to add, image, reference, and then you go to your file, whatever, Fairbanks Moores, yeah, that's who made it. Then I have my diagram right there, and you can see it's pretty small, and it's pretty, it's not the best detail-wise, but sometimes, in this case, what I'm gonna have to do is, because there's another locomotive that's pretty similar to this, basically it's just a longer locomotive version of this, and so what I'm going to do is, my friend also had a diagram of the bigger version of this, and that diagram is more detailed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this diagram to get the main shape down, and then I'm just going to use the other diagram to actually put in all the details. So sometimes, depending on what you're making, it's not exactly the exact thing you want, but since we're just making the basic shape right now and don't really worry about any of that, just worry about making the basic shape. So the first thing I like to do is find a good measurement that you can read. So in this case, and sometimes you can't read it on the diagram, and so you actually have to look up what the length is, and so in this case I can see, and it says, I'm pretty sure it's 49 feet 2 inches, and if you get your measure tool, and you can see it goes from there to there. You can see it's actually in meters right now. So if we click on the scene properties right here, we can go to units and change it to imperial, and you can see that's actually 8 feet in Blender right now. So what we're gonna have to do is scale this up until that is actually, the 49 feet on the diagram is actually 49 feet in Blender, because we don't want a improperly scaled locomotive. So I'm just gonna scale it up however big I think it needs to be, and you're gonna have to play with it a little bit. So I'm just gonna keep on fiddling with it, messing around until I get it to the right length. And if your diagram is in, if your diagram's in metric, then you can keep it in metric or whatever, but whatever measuring thing is on your diagram, you want that to be, as long as it's the same size in Blender as it should be in the diagram, then you're fine. So 44, getting there. And also the way I forget to mention a few things, but these basic tools, you have the move tool, which can just move this around. If you press the arrows, those are all the axes, whatever, and then if you press the squares, you can actually drag that in whatever that way. You can't move, so that fast I can explain things, but you can just play around with these tools for a little bit. And then I used the rotate. You can use the rotate tool, which, if your diagram was uneven, which it looks like mine could be, I think it's actually pretty straight across. But sometimes you have to actually just move a little bit, tweak it. Then you have your scale tool, and then transform just basically puts all of that together, so you can scale it, move it, whatever. But one thing to note is, so if you use these, it actually just squishes it, but if you hold the square and move it that way, it actually just evenly scales it up on that axis. So that's what I'm using. And so anyways, back to trying to get this to the right size. Looks like we almost have it. We're at just a little bit over 53 feet. And also, when you're moving this, if you hold control, kind of like in Trainz, it snaps to the grid. If you hold shift, it smoothly moves, and if you just don't press anything, it's just whatever. So there's that. So I'm just gonna try and scale this down just a little bit. Can already tell that was probably too much, but yeah. So sometimes it's a little annoying, but this is a very crucial step. I know a lot of people actually just scale their locomotives at the very end, but I like doing it before you actually start building anything, because I have parts on other trains that I actually might use on this, like a horn or something. So that's pretty cool. So 49.27 doesn't have to be completely perfect. One thing that does have to be perfect though is the width, but we'll deal with that later. So right now so now we know it's scaled, so we're gonna move this into place. And since this is gonna be the front, because remember we said X is gonna be the front, get your diagram selected, and that's the front. So we're just gonna move the front and center it as best we can by hand for now. We'll get it completely centered once we start making a basic shape. Also, some people actually go into some image editor where you can cut out parts of the diagrams to the front, so you don't have all this clutter. But I've always just done it like this, just because I'm lazy. But you can do whatever you want. So, but anyways, so if you want to not have all that clutter, you can cut it up in GIMP or something, so you don't have to deal with all this when you're trying to model. But you can also hide them if you're trying to model, and they get in the way. So, but we'll talk about all that later. So for now, you have your axis, your front, that piece of diagram is ready. So now what you want to do is we want to get the side. We want to be able to see what the side is like. So to do that, Shift D, and if you right click, Shift D and right click, that just puts it back to where it was. So it may not look like there's anything, but if you try and move it, you can see that you actually duplicated your image, and that goes for a lot of things. You can duplicate objects and stuff like that by doing Shift D. And so you can also, we'll talk about that later, but anyways, now I'm just going to get my rotate tool and hold control so I know that it's actually snapping to 90 degrees. So that's 90 degrees right there, and that's the front. So we're going to go into this view right here. Actually, I forgot another thing is, since we don't have too many diagrams yet, I'm just going to select both of those diagrams by holding Shift. We want this to be at the right height, so if we, right now we can guess and try and get the right height. So I'm just going to, that's about right there, but I'd say that's about the right height, and we can always move it once we get the wheels on there and stuff like that. But so now we have the side view, and it's all scaled. Okay, so now we're all scaled and at the right height and everything. I forgot to mention that. So we also want to try and center it from this side, because we want everything to be centered so it's not all weird in game. It's not just half off the tracks and stuff. And so we're also going to just move this over to the center a little bit like that. So, and it doesn't matter if you move it this way, because that's not going to affect how you see it this way. I'm just going to center it so it's not all the way out there. Okay, so now we have those two, and now we can see we actually have a diagram for the, or not, you know, we can do the rear. So what we're going to do is we're going to just click on the one that would be easiest to rotate. And so this one, Shift D, right click, get a rotate tool, rotate it, oops, rotate it 90 degrees, and then now we can get it lined up. So get our move tool, move it over until we think it's about lined up, and yeah, that's good. I'll just move it back a little bit so nothing's really interfering with anything else. And some diagrams you have to do the top, you know, from this way, and you have to do the other both sides. But this one only has 3, so that's fine. Good enough for our purposes for now, at least. So now that you have this, your diagrams are still a little bit off, so we're gonna fix that. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go to top here, go to add, mesh, and cube, and don't really worry too much about shape and everything, but we're just gonna make sure everything's centered and everything, you know, nothing needs to be rotated. So just gonna put that there, and oops, sorry, go to Y view, move this over, and see if I'm just checking and making sure that we don't need to rotate it. So you can see that's a straight line. So now actually I'm gonna delete that. Then I go to add and add another cube. So now we're gonna actually get it centered. And one way I do this is if we can just move it up there, get our scale tool, scale it this way, and just observe. I don't really know how to explain this, but you know, obviously we can tell it's center, but the diagram's uncentered because it's not, you know, it's uneven. So we're just gonna move this until it's about even. So it's about right there, and then we're just gonna keep scaling this till both, whoops, make sure you get your diagram, because you don't really want to move your cube. So I'd say that's about good right there. So now we're gonna do it this way, and we're not really worrying about shape or anything. We just want to make sure our diagrams are centered. So we're just gonna scale that down a little bit. This one actually looks pretty close. So about right there, yeah, that's good. So now we got to go into this and make sure this side's centered. Move that over a little bit, and I'd say that's about right there. So now that we have that, I'm gonna delete this. That's the last time you'll have to delete that. But we're going to add we're gonna go add mesh cube, and don't mess with it. So I'm gonna keep our origin point the same, and now we're gonna go into edit mode, which, you know, you can do a lot more in edit mode. So you can go into edit mode 2 ways, clicking up here and going to edit mode, or if you press tab, you can toggle between the 2. So now that you're in edit mode, just get your move tool, and we're just gonna, the way I like to model, at least I like modeling diesels, the way I like modeling diesels is if we just move this up and get it up to the, I don't even know what you'd call this, but we're gonna just model the base platform thing. So whoops. So we're gonna select the top, and okay, I actually did a lot right there. So 4 things we need to point out. So first being all of these, this one is the vertex select, and then you have the edge select, and then you have face select. Alright, so what this allows you to do is if you just want to select a whole face instead of having to select each and every one of these, you can actually go into face select, and another thing I forgot to mention, if you hold shift while you hold middle mouse drag, whatever you want to call that, you can actually move around. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, but anyways, so just select the face, or if you want to select like a node or something, just move that down. You can see how that does that, or an edge. But then I went into Shift Z, because if you go into, this is called a wireframe mode, you can select through it, and you know, you can do this. And so I like doing this so I don't have to go like this and do that, because that just takes more time. So anyways, Shift Z, select your face there and move it down to however thick it should be. So I'm gonna say about right there. Then we're gonna grab those 2, and so everything is always centered. Just gonna use the scale instead of moving it one by one. So just scale this out. So let's, yeah, that's right. So Now it should be the right length. Excuse me. So now, gonna go into the front and make sure it's scaled properly on the, I guess you'd call this the Y. So facing the X, I don't know. But okay, so now grab those two faces like I did before, drag it out. Yeah. Let me just, yeah, okay. And I just looked at my reference photo because I couldn't tell. It's like sometimes you can't really tell what's on the diagram, especially in this case because these are some pretty bad diagrams. Like you get the basic shape, but there's not a lot of detail. But it works for our purposes right now. So now that you have that, because that was just modeling the base thing. So I always like doing the bogies and stuff last because that's more complicated and I just don't really like doing those. So now we're going to try and make the actual main body. And so depending on what you're doing, there's a few ways of doing it. So in this case, since I'm going to try and model the cab, I'm going to make this a separate also. You want to try and keep things separate objects because that just makes everything easier later on. You'll see why later on. Actually, a few videos down the line, but just trust me on this. And so what we're going to do is actually I'm going to keep it on the same object because so I just went tab, edit mode, shift Z, selected everything. So what we're going to do is, you know how we duplicated things before, we're just going to do that again. So do shift D, right click, and you want to make sure you never duplicate something without knowing, because if you go in game it kind of looks wonky shading wise. So what we can do now is, and the reason I duplicated instead of just adding a whole new cube and trying to shape it that way is because it's the same, the cab is the same width as the actual thing, and if we tried it wouldn't look as well. We could probably line it up pretty close, but now that we duplicated it instead, we know that it's going to be the same width as the actual, I don't even know the name, but anyways, so now we're just going to move this up, and so we don't have any clipping on the bottom, we're just going to try and get that as close as possible. And sometimes on some things I try and actually just scale it in just a little bit, like a millimeter, even just as small as you can. But anyways, so now since the cab isn't even centered in the first place, we're just going to drag it so manually. So we're just going to select that, move it to where the cab is. Then we're going to get our other side, select that, and drag it to where the cab is. And we can see that it actually has, I don't know what you call this, but has big extruding thing out of it, whatever. We can worry about that later because there's another way to model that, and it doesn't, well, we can always duplicate things to make sure that it's the right width, so let's put it that way. So now we're just going to go over here, select the top, and I'm actually going to go into this view so we can up all the way up and just drag it up until you get the top of the cab. So now we have that, and since the, hang on, let me check because I'm just trying to see. I'm looking to see if the cab's the same height as the hood, whatever you call that. Can't tell, but for now I'm just gonna assume that it is, and so go back into edit mode. I'm gonna select the cab, make sure you don't select anything else, and then we're just gonna duplicate that. Then we're gonna go into the front, whoops, make sure you don't select off of it. If you do, just Control Z. And the way I'm seeing through this diagram, like seeing my actual stuff through the diagram, is just Shift Z, and you can sometimes, if you have it selected and you're not in object mode, you can see it. If you're in edit mode, you can see it through. So now that we have that, we're going to, actually no, we're going to go into this view, drag it up until it's properly, just make sure there's no clipping issues. And yes, actually no, we're going to go over here and make sure we're going to, so it's, since this is centered, we're just going to drag it in to the right width for the hood, and then since it's not centered for the actual length, we're just going to select that and just drag it all the way up. So if we hide our diagrams by pressing the eyes up here, we can see we have somewhat a basic shape, but we're going to want to get those roof curves before we... I mean, I would add those roof curves before we actually call it a basic... I mean, this is pretty basic, so... But I want to add the roof curve stuff, so we're gonna do actually is we're gonna... Well, I feel like the cab's... so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna select the edges, because I feel like the cab is a little bit skinny compared to the... Just a little bit, so we're just gonna bring it out a little bit more. And I just selected all the edges because remember it's the same width as the this. So now to get that curve on the roof, in this case, since we're working with normally what I would do is I'd select these edges, and you can also go into this view and just select those, and then I'd select my bevel tool and do it like this and stuff like that, and just a few other things you have to do, but I just do it like that. But since I'm working with this, I actually can't do that because the curves are like, you'd have to look at it, but if you look it up, the curve is the same. Like the curve on the roof follows, or the curve on the hood follows the curve on the roof. So what I'm gonna do is go to object, or go to add mesh cube. Then we're gonna, then we can just move this up so we can see it through the diagram. Then we're just gonna drag this up, and it doesn't matter where this origin is because we're gonna use this to actually cut through this. So actually, we're gonna hide the rear diagram. We're just gonna hide the front diagram so we can see through the whole thing and see the cab and everything. So that's where that is fine. So go edit mode, and then what we can do is we're just gonna get that. So what we're gonna do basically is we're going to using a bool tool or boolean, whatever you want to call it, we're gonna cut through it. So just imagine this as you're gonna just cut through it. So the way I'm gonna do this is let me think. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna drag this down to where, you know, the roof curve begins, or whatever you want to call it. And then we're gonna get our loop cut, which just sends a cut straight and just a whole loop around it. So then I'm gonna select the edge right there, and we're gonna move it up to where we want the curve to, you know, I can't think of the right words, but you know what I mean. Just observe. And then I'm actually gonna move these down, make sure I have both selected so they're both even. And then if we select this again, get a bevel tool, you can see how that bevels everything. And I'm just gonna add quite a few segments, and you can do that by scrolling. Another way to bevel is Control B. Whoops, sorry, I did Control V, but Control B, and then you can just scroll up and down. So since this is a pretty big part, we're just gonna add pretty decent amount of vertices. So then just gonna click, and you can see how the curve is actually not straight, or it's not accurate to the diagram right now. So what we can do is if we just select, since everything's already selected, just move the actual vertices up and, you know, make it the right curve. And if you hold Control, that deselects it, so just drag that across and just keep moving these up until you get the curve you want. It's just gonna keep... I probably could have added more vertices, I'm being honest, but it's whatever. Okay, so now you can see we actually have shading issues because this is above that, and it doesn't really matter since we're just using the cut, but we just move that so it doesn't look so weird. And we can see that's actually not cutting through the roof all the way, so I'm just going to drag this down, even though the diagram says otherwise, it's fine. And then we're going to actually go over here and just scale this all the way out so it cuts through the whole locomotive. And make sure everything's fine cut-wise, and yep, looks good to me. So I'm just gonna hide the diagrams right now so I can see everything. And if you hold Shift to select your locomotive, actually before you actually cut, One thing you have to do is if you go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and look up the Bool tool. I already have it enabled, but if you just click that checkbox, you can see if the Bool tool. That's an important thing before you actually try cutting anything. So anyways, now once you have that Bool tool ready, hold Shift, select what you want to cut with first, and then select what's going to get cut. And then if you do Control and then minus on the numpad, there's our cut. And okay, that's cutting weird for some reason, and I think that could be because the way it works is, I wish there was a better way for me to show you, but basically you have to line it up with, like, I don't know how to explain this. I'm the wrong person to ask about how it works, but basically it just has to have two edges connecting to it. So let me try this and see if that works. No, it doesn't. It could be because we are because it's like cutting through the roof, and so it can't even okay, well that's not working still. Okay, well basically normally that works. So anyways, yeah, I don't know, but normally that works. I'll figure that out, and I might have to do it another way. If I figure it out soon, I'll just let you guys know soon in the video, but if not, I'll see you guys in the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, share with a friend. And yeah, that's how you get your basic shape and diagram. Okay, so I figured out what we can do to fix this. We can't actually fix the cut itself, but if we select our object, and right now it's not actually cut yet, because it's still this is basically just a preview of what it will look like. So if we go into edit mode, you can see how it's not actually shown up yet. So we can go to apply, then I'm just going to delete that since there's no need to have it anymore, and we can see how it cut, but you didn't know there's no roof. So what we can do, if you hold Alt, and that it lets you select the whole edge, so we can just select that edge, and then if we move over here, make sure you select the edge of the hood, not the cab. And so if you hold Shift and then Alt, select that. If you do Control E, bridge edge loops, it actually just it considers those two edge loops and just bridges the space in between. The best way it knows how. I think it's actually another way of doing it. Let me try something. If you hold F, that actually fills it, which is another way of doing it, but you can see how it's having some issues. So we're just gonna Control E, bridge edge loops, because that's what I've done. So just gonna do that to the cab as well. Control E, bridge edge loops. So now it looks like an actual locomotive, at least very starts of one. So I'm gonna look at my reference photos real quick, and it actually looks like there's some kind of, I won't say notch, but there's an angle to the front of the nose. And so what we're gonna do, actually, I'm gonna see if we can see any sign of that in the diagram, which we can actually. See how it has the two lines right there. That's where I'll just show you. But what I've done for this in the past is loop. If you get your loop cut, it's actually a little bit late now since we already cut the thing. So actually what we're going to try and do is see if we can back up before we applied the modifier, which we can. I think, yes, no, yes, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the loop cut, get our bevel tool, make sure diagrams show, then just bevel that until it's right width, and that just keeps it even. So now that we have that, we're gonna go up to top view, and if we had top diagram, we'd actually be able to see how much it actually curves, but we don't, so I'm just gonna guess, and it's not too sharp, so I'm just gonna add a little bit right there. Yeah, it's actually it's not even that much, so yeah, I'd say that's about right. It's just something looks weird when I did the cut, and so it just didn't look how it was supposed to, and so I knew I needed to do something, so I looked at my reference photos, and yeah. So now we're gonna apply that, delete that, go to here, select these edges, go over here, select these edges, Control E, bridge edge loops, and it's a little bit wonkier now just because we did the edge loops, but all that means for us is just a few more vertices, which is fine because it still looks fine. So then we can go over here and select these. Since we didn't cut those, we can just bridge edge loops. And now you can see we have our basic shape. But if we look at our reference photos, our roof is actually not rugged or whatever you want to call it. It's actually smooth. And a way to do that is if we go into face select and just select all of the roof pieces. And then right click, we can do shade smooth, and then you can see it looks pretty weird because we need to add a modifier that makes it look not weird. So if we go to add modifier, edge split, you can see that that looks much better. And also that we'll worry about that in the next video, because that's when we're gonna actually bevel the corners and add some windows and stuff like that, some more details. But that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, share with a friend. I hope you found this helpful, and yeah, see you in the next video.